بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Dear friends, welcome to Idea Foundation Forum. Today we will discuss the research topic 6 major reasons of the Muslims' decadence under the 5th subtopic Silent Majorities, Failure in Identifying the Enemy and Fight it Out. The doctrine of equality of the citizens of a state in the socio-economic and political spheres of life is the hallmark of Islamic teachings. Hallmark. The Quran, Sunnah and the farewell sermon by Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam provided necessary intellectual base to build this doctrine, while ibadat are supposed to train the Muslims for practicing this doctrine in all socio-economic and political affairs. This doctrine of equity is not new in Islam. Rather, it has been the core message, fundamental message of the prophetic mission, along with the faith in the oneness of Allah. It promotes pluralism, inclusiveness, socio-economic justice and equity, equal rights and entitlements. But as history tells, mostly the elitist forces succeeded to establish despotic rule with exclusive institutions ensuring concentration of wealth and power in a few hands. To perpetuate servitude of the masses, the ruling elites kept the masses impoverished and ignorant. Through the ages, whenever a prophet came to reform this disequilibrium, he was opposed by the ruling elites to keep the docile masses away from his influence by employing all means, covert or overt, known or concealed. Dilemma of the history lies in the fact that the masses, victims of the oppressive rule, mostly remained passively silent because of ignorance, petty interests, or fearing regressive response from the ruling elites. Muslim populations too, despite having very forceful doctrine of equality of the mankind and participative board of ibadat, could never launch a worthwhile mass movement for establishing democratic governance system with inclusive institutions. Even today, the most fundamental reason of underdevelopment of the Muslim world is perpetuation of undemocratic and extractive political and economic institutions, unchallenged by any persistent mass movement by the Muslim populations on the pattern of glorious or French revolutions that changed the socio-economic and political landscape of the Western world. Let us discuss this scenario in some detail. Dear friends, in an earlier lecture on man versus Iblis, clash of good and evil, we saw that when superiority of the man was recognized at the time of his creation, Iblis, instead of being repentant, shameful on his egoistic disobedience, asked for a respite till the day of judgment with the powers to try his tricks to deceive the man, to cheat the man away from the great purpose of his creation. Allah granted the desired respite to Iblis. On the other hand, the man was honored with the vicegerency of the earth and commanding authority over its resources of the earth. Thus, the man was exposed to a situation of test and trial in this world, so that his final reward for the hereafter could be determined on the basis of his response to the given situation. However, the man was empowered with great faculties of free personality, knowledge, divine soul, and the revealed books, prophetic mission to perform his role of vicegerent in the most befitting manner and save him from the charms, deceptions of Iblis. So the man was assigned to establish a society based on the laws of nature, on the laws of nature revealed in the divine message that laws of nature cherish faith in the oneness of Allah, the justice, universalism, humanism, and collectivism, collective well-being of humanity. Whereas Iblis' egoistic attitude and short-sightedness moved him to opt for materialism, determinism, individualism, and elitism. Thus, the mankind was supposed to remain conscious of the devious tricks of Iblis and his accomplices are forces of evil and unite to fight them out to promote the cause of Allah. Allah very strongly warned the man to remain alert, to secure him from the deceptive traps of Iblis and his accomplices. Ayat 27 of Surah Al-Araf precisely and beautifully explains this fact in the words. Listen. O children of Adam, O mankind, let not Satan tempt. What is Satan? Iblis. Tempt, deceive. Let not Satan tempt you as he removed your parents from paradise, stripping them of their clothing to show them their private parts. Indeed, he sees you, he and his tribe, Iblis and his accomplices, from where you do not see them. Indeed, we have made the devil's allies to those who do not believe. If we study this ayat minutely, it refers to 4 responsibilities of the believers to deal with the mischievous designs of Iblis or the forces of evil. First responsibility is to know the enemies of Islam well. We must know the enemy of Islam. It becomes very difficult to identify the forces of evil as they mostly act deceptively. Note the words of the ayat. Indeed, he sees you, Iblis, and his accomplices. They see you from where you do not see them. He and his accomplices are our hidden enemies. He sees us, but we can't see him, the Iblis and his accomplices. The history has proved the words of the Quran. You go through the history, you will find the truth of this ayat. Religious conflicts and clash of civilizations are just the facade tools of the forces of evil to divide the humanity, to serve their wicked designs, to serve Iblis and his accomplices' wicked designs. Second responsibility of the believers requires from the believers to have a strong faith for security against the evil deceptions, as the last part of the ayat says. We have made the devils allies to those who do not believe, who don't have the faith. The faith weakens. The faith weakens when it is made subjected to religious disputations. When faith weakens, unity of the Muslims is fragmented. That's why Allah has directed the Muslims to follow the Quran, to avoid religious disputations and disunity, as revealed in ayat 103 and 105 of Surah Al Imran, shown on the screen. The Quran urges, necessitates the believers to be united against the forces of evil who deny the oneness of Allah and His sovereignty over the universe, in ayat 73 of Surah Al-Anfal, in the words, listen. The unbelievers are allies of one another. Unbelievers, forces of evil. The unbelievers are allies of one another unless you do this, there would be fitna, tumult and oppression on earth and great mischief. It is an historic message. Have a look on every side of the Muslim world. You will find the truth of this ayat. Third responsibility of the believers is to stay united by strengthening their bondage with the Quran. And their fourth responsibility is to fight out oppression of the evil forces on the earth as directed in the ayat. The Quran reveals Allah's intention at several places, urging the Muslims to support good and fight out evils like injustice, iniquities, and all sorts of oppressions. For that, please study ayat 143 of Surah Baqarah, 104 and 110 of Surah Al Imran, and 1 to 3 of Surah Al Asr. Dear friends, the verses of the Quran we mentioned fix 4 responsibilities on the believers to promote good and fight out evils causing injustice, iniquities, and all types of oppressions in the society. First and the foremost is to identify, note it. First responsibility, first and the foremost is to identify the forces of evil are the enemies of Islam. What we generally ignore. And that's the historic dilemma of the Muslim societies. The believers must strengthen their faith, focusing on the Quran and Sunnah to ensure internal unity and avoiding religious disputations based on frivolous grounds that cause weakening of the Muslim society physically as well as intellectually. With the knowledge of the enemy and strength of unity, the believers are directed to fight against the evil forces until the oppression is eliminated and justice and peace is restored. In Islam, there is no room for silence. I repeat, in Islam, there is no room for silence. Write it in golden words. In Islam, there is no room for silence, indifference, or compromise on the truth. The Quran has given great emphasis on this point. A few references in this regard have been shown on the screen. Please study them. To highlight severity of the matter, Ayat 135 of Surah Al-Nisa is quoted here. Please note each word urging the believers to stand against the evil honestly, vocally, and firmly. Note the words. O ye who believe means, O believers, stand out firmly for justice as witness to God, even as against yourself, even if it is against your interest, or your parents, or your kin, and whether it be against rich or poor. For God can best protect both. Follow not lust of your hearts, lest ye swerve. And if you distort justice or decline to do justice, verily God is well acquainted with all that ye do. Against this backdrop, the response of the vast majorities of the peoples against the tyranny, injustice, and oppressive rule by the despotic elites has been deplorable throughout the human history. Deplorable, disappointing. They have been taking this oppression as the act of destiny. They have been taking this oppression as the act of destiny, or have been unconscious of their rights, or have been willfully, with intention, playing as puppets or accomplices for petty interests or preferred compromises and silence out of fear or aggression by the ruling elites. This historic dilemma on the part of the vast majorities has been the major cause of perpetuation of oppressive rule through extractive institutions in the human societies. The ruling elites generally showed internal cohesion among themselves, but applied the strategy of divide and rule to keep their peoples divided and weakened for security, for safety, and perpetuation of their exploitative despotic rule. Throughout the pages of human history, we see how tiny materialist elites kept the vast majorities of humans captivated by dividing them on the pretexts of geography, ethnicity, politico-economic slogans, and three C's of creed, culture, and civilizations. Elitists have been successful in their strategy of divide and rule. Why? Because they were united and knew their objective well, while the disorderly majorities, unconscious of their interests and inherent power of unity, opted to remain passive and silent to suffer oppression and exploitation. Dear friends, let us have a look on the pages of history. The powerful elite opposed Hazrat Nuh's mission. Hazrat Nuh's mission to protect their interests by all means, while majority of the people were convinced of the truth of the prophetic mission given by Hazrat Nuh. And their hearts had been throbbing with the forces of good. Yet they did not dare to stand against the tyrannical rule of the tiny but powerful elites due to fear and short-lived interests. Note my words. Had they not suppressed their conscience, had they broken their silence against elitist tyranny, the forces of evil would have never prospered and dominated the humanity. Likewise, Hazrat Abraham advocated that the man's egotism and individualism were in conflict with the laws of nature, which restrain progress of the human society. But despite long strenuous struggle of the Prophet, no mass movement of the people could be seen that could have challenged despotic and extractive mindset of its age. Dilemma of silent majority in the era of Moses was as evident as it had been in the eras of Hazrat Nuh and Abraham. Ayat 83 of Surah Yunus displayed on the screen reveals this fact. Similarly, no mass movement could be seen sporting the call of Prophet Jesus Christ for revival of the Moses religion of oneness of Allah, justice and common well-being of the humanity. Rather, they preferred silence, following the tradition of history. Allah has disapproved individuals' disregard to their collective responsibilities for promoting the good and fighting against the evil. The Quran quotes several instances where whole communities were collectively destroyed when some evil or disorder became social norm against the directions of the prophets, and majorities of the peoples remained silent spectators. Some of such references are shown on the screen. Dear friends, in the beginning of the lecture we mentioned the intellectual base provided by Islam to build the doctrine of equality of the citizens of a state in the socio-economic and political spheres of life, which was much more comprehensive than the one initiated by Magna Carta Charter in 1215. Then why the Muslims could not employ these guiding principles for developing some pluralistic political system that could have provided a mechanism for peaceful transfer of power with sustainable state apparatus and a stable, fair and progressive governance framework through inclusive institutions. The distinctive factor that led the Magna Carta process to the glorious revolution, French Revolution or Industrial Revolution, that entirely changed the socio-economic and political landscape of the Western world were the peoples of these developed countries who started their struggle for equalitarian and pluralistic principles. Not the rulers, but the peoples. In the context of the Muslim world, unfortunately, said doctrine of equality of the citizens could not get adequate momentum supported by some mass movement which could have brought a revolutionary change for establishing institutions to realize the humanistic, pluralistic, equalitarian and progressive spirit of this doctrine. Dear friends, in my humble opinion, it has either been ignorance of our religious leadership that they could not understand the pluralistic and progressive spirit of Islam, or they have been maliciously implementing the legacy of socio-political divide emanating from the old Roman, Persian, Arab syndrome initially seen during the days of battles of Jamal and Siffin. Unfortunate. For the deception of innocent masses, this socio-political divide had been cunningly carved into sectarianism. Thus, the religious leadership kept the Muslims engrossed in sectarian predicament so overwhelmingly that they couldn't find opportunity to know the progressive and evolutionary aspects of Islam. Despotic elites patronized such religious disorientations to perpetuate their rule based on socio-religious divisions, intellectual degradation, and extractive institutions. Now, what should be done? Now, to pull the Muslim Ummah out of the marshlands of socio-economic and political decadence, we need to identify our friends and foes, keeping in view the interests of Islam. First of all, we should identify the interests of Islam. Then, on that basis, we must identify our friends and our enemies. Number one. Number two, and we need to unite to launch a mass movement to fight out sectarian divide, moral and intellectual stagnation caused by taqleed, religious rigidities, conceptual disorientations, and deterministic mindset, and pursue the glorious path of peace, prosperity, and freedom by striking hard to build inclusive and pluralistic socio-economic and political institutions based on the Qur'anic principles. So, dear friends, with this we conclude our discussion here. These programs are recorded both in Urdu and English. Their videos can be watched on ideafoundation.com.pk website or its YouTube channel and Facebook. Their written versions are also available on the Idea Foundation's website. Please note, code number of this program, Idea 1B R29 or lecture number 135. All friends are requested to subscribe the Foundation's YouTube web channel for the benefit of this noble cause. Thank you friends for participation. Allah Hafiz.